Now, the government continues to implement a strict curfew with no clear end in sight, this even as it mulls a possible lockdown. So what scenarios is the government considering in making its decision? Well, joining me now is the government spokesman, Colonel Cyrus Oguna, and welcome to Punchline.
Thank you so much.
So what are the scenarios that the government is looking at in terms of COVID-19 and its impact on security?
We're looking at scenarios whereby we have got an outbreak of this disease within the former settlement and also in areas that have got high population. But also looking at scenarios whereby many of our discipline force members are also infected. They could be infected, not just the police, but also members of the Kenya Defense Forces. And we are looking at possibilities of how to ensure that this doesn't happen. Not just in terms of state security, but also in terms of human security. So if you look at state securities whereby now members of the discipline forces are infected, but also when you look at human securities whereby now livelihoods are lost. So you've seen cases whereby a few people have been able to be laid off because the business environment is not doing very well. But also looking at a possibility whereby now those that have been laid off, now livelihoods have been lost. Now, as a government,
so what specifically are you doing to make sure, especially
the government is looking at various options in how to be able to help those. Remember, a couple of days ago, almost a week to the day, the head of state was able to improve the national protection program, social protection program, and he did that by improving it by 10 billion Kenya shilling. This was meant actually to be able to have a lot more people incorporated into the program. Yeah, but specifically for state security, what measures are you taking to avert
such
in terms
a
of state security, indeed, there's training that has been given to members of the discipline forces, the Kenya Defense Forces, the police, and even the prisons. And this training is targeting, certain leadership in terms of training of trainers so that they can be able to cascade the same training downwards. So that training is currently on.
Will they be frontline staff to have personal protective equipment?
Yeah, for those, not necessarily so, but those who are dealing with, suspected COVID cases will have to put on PPEs. Remember, in case of a situation whereby we have, mass outbreak in, various communities, then of course even members of the police at some point may be forced to have the PPEs.
Shouldn't every policeman have a mask and
not as of now. That may not be necessary as of now, because the situation as it is now is not that really bad. But should it deteriorate further, and those that will get into contact with suspected cases, therefore will have to put on the PPEs. All
right. How long is the curfew likely to last?
That cannot put a definite time frame to it, and nobody can. Remember that even by the time that the curfew was ordered for, it took a multi-agency to look at the developments as far as this situation is concerned. The same multi-agency is actually reviewing and analyzing the situation as it develops, and therefore it is the same multi-agency team that will be able to determine that it is now time to call it off or let it go on.
But what would inform that decision?
The decision will be informed by how the situation develops. If you're able to flatten our curve very, very early in the day, then they will look at it and then make a decision.
Scientifically, are you pegging that on any specific numbers? If you can keep the infections below a certain number?
I cannot talk about numbers, all right? I'm not a doctor, but you've got doctors who are looking at these numbers and they are advising on what action needs to be taken.
Okay, how many police have been deployed countrywide to enforce the curfew?
Honestly, the police are deployed with regards to requirements, and the numbers that have been deployed are actually sufficient to ensure that hours of curfew are secure, that nobody is able to break curfew timing, but also nobody is able to undermine security during curfew.
What are those sufficient numbers?
Numbers that are sufficient to carry out the task.
What number is that?
We cannot talk about specific numbers of the police force.
Let's talk about Nairobi specifically.
Even Nairobi we cannot, because that is an aspect of national security. We cannot reveal numbers.
All right. Given the projected rise in infections and the state of our health facilities, what is the government doing so far in terms of building the capacity of hospitals?
We are doing a lot in terms of technical capacity and also infrastructural capacity. Remember, we have been able to improve Mbagathi Hospital in terms of infrastructural capacity. Now we have a 120-bed capacity at Mbagathi. We've also been able to operationalize Kenyatta University Teaching and Referral Hospital. We've been able also to improve various facilities within the county to be able to be converted into quarantine facilities. But in terms of technical capacity, we've been training training of trainers, frontline healthcare workers, so that the training of the trainers are able now to cascade the same training down to the grassroots level. So we are going to also have community health volunteers to be trained by the same training, trainers.
All right.
So that has been going on now.
All right. I just want to take you back. What part of the number of security officers deployed for specifically the curfew enforcement is a national security issue? We're not talking about the total number of security officers.
No, the number of police officers, any other jurisdiction, is always a national security issue, and we can never be able to reveal the number on a national television like now. We can't. So.
The Strategic Food Reserve Chairman, Dr. Noah Kesa, has warned that the country has no maize reserves with COVID-19 shutting down markets and the continuing plague of locusts. What is the government doing to stave off the threat of mass
The government has got contingencies to ensure that we don't run out of food. They're aware that the issue of locusts and also now the COVID situation is also having its own impact on the economy. But the government has contingencies to ensure that we have sufficient food to be able to take care of the population.
All right, and we'll be speaking to Colonel Oguna a little bit later, where I can drill him a little harder on those answers very shortly. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
You may take your